This is Chapter 20, Unavoidable Fate, Part 1, from a story called The Time-Dilated Generations, by Esteban Gallardo. The fate of the Sadra generational ship was sealed 500 years after its arrival. The Wolf Rayet 124 expedition fared no better. Within 6 centuries of landfall, the last human perished, leaving no trace of civilization behind. Another system, another loss. The vast silence of space swallowed both their ambitions, erasing their struggles as if they had never existed. The 2 catastrophic failures had already sent shockwaves rippling through the fleet, but the darkest hour was yet to come. The VY Canis Majoris generational ship, tantalizingly close to its destination with mere light years remaining, never reached its promised haven. The Sadra generational ship reached its destination, an eyeball planet orbiting an M-type red dwarf star. Unlike Rigel 1, which had suffered a devastating orbital cataclysm that plunged its habitable twilight zone into an unrelenting deep freeze, Sadra faced no such gravitational instability. It was a fortunate stroke of fate. With stable conditions, the settlers thrived. They learned from the tragedies of Rigel 1 and Negus, understanding that the cyclical nature of capitalism and socialism, successfully balanced for centuries aboard the generational ships, had failed on planetary soil. Determined to prevent history from repeating itself, they enacted a radical solution, a dictatorial communist system designed to eliminate economic disparity once and for all. It was a utopia, at least for a time. Under this system, survival was never a concern. Food, shelter, healthcare, and education were provided to all, free of charge. The state carefully regulated industries, preventing business owners from amassing unchecked wealth or influencing governance. Entrepreneurship was permitted, but those who succeeded were rewarded with comfortable lives, akin to a prosperous middle class from the 20th century Earth. More importantly, people were free to choose how they contributed to society. No one was forced into a career they despised. For the first 4 centuries, Sadra flourished under this model, achieving in 300 years what had taken Rigel 1 500. But utopias are fragile. For many, the guarantee of basic needs stripped life of urgency. Without fear of poverty, some lost all motivation to contribute. Work became optional, and while incentives existed for those who strived for excellence, the difference between mere survival and true success was not stark enough to drive ambition. As decades passed, complacency seeped into every aspect of life. Essential tasks, once performed with diligence in the struggle to terraform the planet, became half-hearted obligations. Jobs requiring discipline and precision saw a decline in professionalism. The system, once robust in the face of hardship, began to erode under the weight of its own stability. The government responded with increasing control. Strict policies were enforced to combat stagnation. But the more oppressive the state became, the more resentment festered among the people. A breaking point was inevitable. Discontent simmered for decades before finally igniting into a series of violent coups. One by one, the rigid communist regimes toppled, replaced not by democracy, but by militarized states. The shift was rapid and brutal. Order was restored, but at an unspeakable cost. The early years of military rule were seen as a necessary course correction. Hard work was no longer optional. The era of aimless leisure ended overnight. If one did not contribute, they did not survive, except for those in the military, who wielded absolute authority. The economy, once tightly controlled, swung to the other extreme. With no restrictions on wealth accumulation, corporations flourished unchecked, and the gap between rich and poor widened at an alarming rate. The people had traded one extreme for another. Protests were not tolerated. The military regimes, growing ever more paranoid, saw dissent as treason. The only currency that mattered was obedience. As power consolidated in the hands of generals and oligarchs, the planet fractured into rival nations, each armed, each suspicious, and each ruled by leaders who saw war as the inevitable solution to their differences. Decades passed, and the global arms race escalated. Military expansion was no longer a precaution, it was a necessity. Generals who had risen through the ranks on a promise of a conquest now sat at the helm of nuclear-armed states, each waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then the moment came. In the year 505 after landfall, the first missiles launched. In mere hours, billions perished into the inferno of nuclear war. The survivors, those who had managed to escape the initial blasts, faced an even crueler fate. The ensuing nuclear winter choked the atmosphere, shrouding the planet in darkness, freezing the land, and poisoning the remnants of civilization. Over the next 20 years, the last stragglers succumbed to radiation, starvation, and despair. The final transmission from Sathra's colony came in broken fragments, a garbled distress call echoing across the time-dilated network of the fleet. Then, silence. Among all the planets humanity had encountered, the one orbiting Wolf-Rayet 124 was a rarity beyond imagination. It was, by every measure, the most Earth-like world ever discovered. A dense, oxygen-rich environment, a vast iron core generating a powerful magnetic field, and even a massive moon stabilizing its orbit, conditions that mirrored Earth in ways that no other exoplanet had. It was the dream of every astronomer, every hopeful colonist, a true second Earth. But there was a catch. Wolf-Rayet 124 was no ordinary star. It was a titanic, ultramassive Wolf-Rayet sequence star, one of the rarest, most short-lived stellar phenomena in the universe. A cauldron of nuclear fury, burning at such an extreme rate in its lifespan, was measured not in billions, but in mere millions of years. These stars did not die peacefully. They collapsed violently, often detonating as a supernovae before giving birth to black holes. By all logic, this world should have never been considered for colonization, and yet, against all odds, the astrophysicists discovered something extraordinary. The star, despite its immense size, still had approximately 5 million years before its death. For humans, that was an eternity. Even accounting for necessary evacuation well before the star's demise, it meant at least 3 million years of habitability, more than enough time for civilization to thrive and plan its next great migration. In cosmic terms, it was a fleeting moment, but in human terms, it was everything. Due to the star's sheer mass, the planet's habitable zone lay far from its sun, 10 times the distance of Neptune from Sol. A full orbit around Wolf-Rayet 124 took nearly 500 Earth years, and yet, for the first time in the fleet's long and painful history, when the settlers arrived, they found something miraculous waiting for them. Life. Primitive bacterial life had already begun shaping the planet's atmosphere, accelerating the transformation into a truly habitable world. Unlike past colonies, where entire generations struggled through centuries of terraforming, the settlers of Wolf-Rayet 124 accomplished in record time what had taken others hundreds of years. In just a single century, they had a breathable atmosphere. By the year 300, the planet had been fully colonized. Cities rose across its continents, connected by sprawling networks of infrastructure. The population swelled, comfortably adjusting to the planet's slightly higher 1.1 g gravity. The hardships of colonization were met with eager determination, and for the first time since leaving Earth, it felt as though humanity had found a world where they could truly live, rather than merely survive. Even knowing their time was ultimately limited, the people of Wolf-Rayet 124 embraced their existence. The planet would not be their final home, but it would be a paradise, for as long as they could keep it. Learning from the catastrophic fates of Rigel 1, Negus, and Sadra, the settlers were determined to avoid the extremes that had doomed their predecessors. They maintained the cycle of capitalism and socialism that had sustained the generational shifts for centuries, but implemented safeguards to prevent the unchecked inequality and radicalism that had led to collapse. Unlike Negus, where capitalism had spiraled into dystopian exploitation, Wolf-Rayet 124 ensured that no one was ever truly abandoned. Publicly funded healthcare, education, and basic housing were guaranteed. Food security was never in question. However, unlike the failed utopian experience of Sadra, these essentials were not handed out freely, with no incentive to work. Instead, the system struck a delicate balance. Basic needs were met, but in community living quarters where privacy was scarce, ensuring that those who wished for more had motivation to earn it. Private housing, wealth, and luxuries could be attained, but economic inequality was kept within strict bounds. There were no billionaires, no ruling corporate elites, but also no government-enforced equality. Wealth could be pursued, but never at the cost of mass suffering. The system was designed to apply pressure without suffocation, enough to drive progress without pushing people into desperation. And most importantly, everyone accepted this balance. At first, the colonists of Wolf-Rayet 124 found solace in their connection with Sadra. Both generational ships had arrived just 50 years apart, meaning that, for all practical purposes, the two civilizations were building their new worlds side by side. Their societies may have followed different paths, one governed by strict communist rule, the other maintaining a measured cycle of capitalism and socialism, but their shared mission bound them together. For decades, communication flourished. There was an unspoken understanding between the two worlds, a camaraderie in the stars. The exchange of culture, science, and even simple conversations between ordinary citizens gave a sense of belonging in the vast emptiness of space. Despite the loneliness and interstellar exile, they were not alone. Humanity had not simply scattered into the void, but had kept its unity across the light years. But then Sadra fell. The military coup d'etat shattered its fragile stability, fracturing the planet into opposing, hostile states. The once thriving cultural exchange collapsed into radio silence, as Wolf-Rayet 124's administration heavily restricted all transmissions from Sadra. At first, it was justified as a precaution, an attempt to prevent their own world from being dragged into the chaos. But the true problem lay in the very foundation of human civilization. For centuries, humanity had prioritized instant communication, ensuring that no distance, not even the gulfs between the stars, could sever the bonds between people. The technology was universal, embedded in the fabric of daily life. Almost everyone had access to it. And no law, no decree, could fully stop them from watching Sadra destroy itself. That was Chapter 20, Unavoidable Fate, Part 1, from a story called The Time Dilated Generations, by Esteban Gallardo. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next time.